双语音标领航，注音阅读启蒙，叶兴阳有声读物。
Heimskringla, The Chronicle of the Kings of Norway, by Snorri Sturluson. Preface of Snorri Sturluson. In this book I have had old stories written down, as I have heard them told by intelligent people, concerning chiefs who have held dominion in the northern countries, and who spoke the Danish tongue, and also concerning some of their family branches, according to what has been told me. Some of this is found in ancient family registers, in which the pedigrees of kings and other personages of high birth are reckoned up, and part is written down after old songs and ballads which our forefathers had for their amusement. Now, although we cannot just say what truth there may be in these, yet we have the certainty that old and wise men held them to be true. Thjodolf of Vin was the skald of Harald Harfager, and he composed a poem for King Ragnvald the Mountain High, which is called Ynglingadal. This Ragnvald was a son of Olaf Gerstadaf, the brother of King Halfdan the Black. In this poem 30 of his forefathers are reckoned up, and the death and burial place of each are given. He begins with Jalnar, a son of Ingvafri, whom the Swedes, long after his time, worshipped and sacrificed to, and from whom the race or family of the Ynglings take their name. Ivan Skaldaspiller also reckoned up the ancestors of Earl Hakon the Great in a poem called Heiligjadal, composed about Hakon, and therein he mentions Seeming, a son of Ingvafri, and he likewise tells of the death and funeral rites of each. The lives and times of the Yngling race were written from Thjodolf's relation enlarged afterwards by the accounts of intelligent people. As to funeral rites, the earliest age is called the Age of Burning, because all the dead were consumed by fire, and over their ashes were raised standing stones. But after Fry was buried under a cairn at Ups, many chiefs raised cairns, as commonly as stones, to the memory of their relatives. The age of cairns began properly in Denmark after Dan Milkelate had raised for himself a burial cairn, and ordered that he should be buried in it on his death, with his royal ornaments and armor, his horse and saddle furniture, and other valuable goods. And many of his descendants followed his example. But the burning of the dead continued, long after that time, to be the custom of the Swedes and Northmen. Iceland was occupied in the time that Harald Harfager was the king of Norway. There were skalds in Harald's court whose poems the people know by heart even at the present day, together with all the songs about the kings who have ruled in Norway since his time. And we rest the foundations of our story principally upon the songs which were sung in the presence of the chiefs themselves or of their sons, and take all to be true that is found in such poems about their feats and battles. For although it be the fashion with skalds to praise most those in whose presence they are standing, yet no one would dare to relate to a chief what he, and all those who heard it, knew to be a false and imaginary, not a true account of his deeds, because that would be mockery, not praise. Of the priest Frode. The priest Frode, the learned, a son of Thorgils the son of Geller, was the first man in this country who wrote down in the Norse language narratives of events both old and new. In the beginning of his book he wrote principally about the first settlements in Iceland, the laws and government, and next of the lagmen, and how long each had administered the law. And he reckoned the years at first, until the time when Christianity was introduced into Iceland, and afterwards reckoned from that to his own times. To this he added many other subjects, such as the lives and times of kings of Norway and Denmark, and also of England, the side accounts of great events which have taken place in this country itself. His narratives are considered by many men of knowledge to be the most remarkable of all, because he was a man of good understanding, and so old that his birth was as far back as the year after Harald Sigurdsson's fall. He wrote, as he himself says, the lives and times of the kings of Norway from the report of O.D. Coulson, a grandson of Hal of Sida. O.D. again took his information from Thorgeir of Fradskal, who was an intelligent man, and so old that when Earl Hakon the Great was killed, he was dwelling at Nidarnes, the same place at which King Olaf Tryggvason afterwards laid the foundation of the merchant town of Nidaros, i.e., Throndheim, which is now there. the priester came, when 7 years old, to Hakadal to Hal Thorinson, and was there 14 years. Hal was a man of great knowledge and of excellent memory, and he could even remember being baptized, when he was 3 years old, by the priest Thankrand, the year before Christianity was established by law in Iceland. Ar was 12 years of age when Bishop Eilif died, and at his death 80 years had elapsed since the fall of Olaf Tryggvason. Hal died 9 years later than Bishop Eilif, and had attained nearly the age of 94 years. Hal had traded between the two countries, and had enjoyed intercourse with King Olaf the Saint, by which he had gained greatly in reputation, and he had become well acquainted with the Kingdom of Norway. He had fixed his residence in Hakadal when he was 30 years of age, and he had dwelt there 64 years. As tells us, Teit, a son of Bishop Eilif, was fostered in the house of Hal at Hakadal, and afterwards dwelt there himself. He taught Ar the priest, and gave him information about many circumstances which Ar afterwards wrote down. Ar also got many a piece of information from Thurid, a daughter of the god Snor. She was wise and intelligent, and remembered her father Snor, who was nearly 35 years of age when Christianity was introduced into Iceland, and died a year after King Olaf the Saint's fall. So it is not wonderful that Ar the priest had good information about ancient events both here in Iceland and abroad. Being a man anxious for information, intelligent, and of excellent memory, and having besides learned much from old intelligent persons. But the songs seem to me most reliable if they are sung correctly, and judiciously interpreted. Halfdan the Black Saga. Preliminary remarks. Of this saga, there are other versions found in Fagurskinna and in Flateyjarbók. The Flateyjarbók version is to a great extent a copy of Snor. The story about Halfdan's dream is found both in Fagurskinna and in Flateyjarbók. The probability is that both Snor and the author of Fagurskinna must have transcribed the same original text. Ed.1. Halfdan fights with Gandalf and Sigtryg. Halfdan was a year old when his father was killed, and his mother Asa set off immediately with him westwards to Agder, and set herself there in the kingdom which her father Harold had possessed. Halfdan grew up there, and soon became stout and strong, and, by reason of his black hair, was called Halfdan the Black. When he was 18 years old, he took his kingdom in Agder, and went immediately to Vestfold, where he divided that kingdom, as before related, with his brother Olaf. The same autumn he went with an army to Vingulmark against King Gandalf. They had many battles, and sometimes one, sometimes the other gained the victory. But at last they agreed that Halfdan should have half of Vingulmark, as his father Gudrod had had it before. Then King Halfdan proceeded to Romerike, and subdued it. King Sigtryg, son of King Eystein, who then had his residence in Heidmark, and who had subdued Romerike before, having heard of this, came out with his army against King Halfdan, and there was great battle, in which King Halfdan was victorious. And just as King Sigtryg and his troops were turning about to fly, an arrow struck him under the left arm, and he fell dead. Halfdan then laid the whole of Romerike under his power. King Eystein's second son, King Sigtryg's brother, was also called Eystein, and was then king in Heidmark. As soon as Halfdan had returned to Vestfold, King Eystein went out with his army to Romerike, and laid the whole country in subjection to him too. Battle between Halfdan and Eystein. When King Halfdan heard of these disturbances in Romerike, he again gathered his army together, and went out against King Eystein. A battle took place between them, and Halfdan gained the victory, and Eystein fled up to Heidmark, pursued by Halfdan. Another battle took place, in which Halfdan was again victorious, and Eystein fled northwards, up into the dales to the Hurs Gudbrand. There he was strengthened with new people, and in winter he went towards Heidmark, and met Halfdan the Black upon a large island which lies in the Mjosen Lake. There a great battle was fought, and many people on both sides were slain, but Halfdan won the victory. There fell Guthorm, the son of the Hearst Gudbrand, who was one of the finest men in the uplands. Then Eystein fled north up the valley, and sent his relation Halvard Skok to King Halfdan to beg for peace. On consideration of their relationship, King Halfdan gave King Eystein half of Heidmark, which he and his relations had held before, but kept to himself Thoden, and the district called Land. He likewise appropriated to himself Hadeland, and thus became a mighty king. 3. Halfdan's marriage. Halfdan the Black got a wife called Ragnhild, a daughter of Harald Gulskeg Goldbeard, who was a king in Son. They had a son, to whom Harald gave his own name, and the boy was brought up in Son by his mother's father, King Harald. Now when this Harald had lived out his days nearly, and was become weak, having no son, he gave his dominions to his daughter's son Harald, and gave him his title of king, and he died soon after. The same winter his daughter Ragnhild died, and the following spring the young Harald fell sick and died at 10 years of age. As soon as Halfdan the Black heard of his son's death, he took the road northwards to Son with a great force, and was well received. He claimed the heritage and dominion after his son, and no opposition being made, he took the whole kingdom. Earl Adalnjov the Slender, who was a friend of King Halfdan, came to him from Galar, and the king set him over the Son district, to judge in the country according to the country's laws, and collect scat upon the king's account. Thereafter King Halfdan proceeded to his kingdom in the uplands. 4. Halfdan's strife with Gandalf's sons. In autumn, King Halfdan proceeded to Vingulmark. One night when he was there in guest quarters, it happened that about midnight a man came to him who had been on the watch on horseback, and told him a war force was come near to the house. The king instantly got up, ordered his men to arm themselves, and went out of the house and drew them up in battle order. At the same moment, Gandalf's sons, Heising and Helsing, made their appearance with a large army. There was a great battle, but Halfdan being overpowered by the numbers of people fled to the forest, leaving many of his men on this spot. His foster father, Ulver Spake the Wise, fell here. The people now came in swarms to King Halfdan, and he advanced to seek Gandalf's sons. They met at Ede, near Lake Oirin, and fought there. Heising and Helsing fell, and their brother Haek saved himself by flight. King Halfdan then took possession of the whole of Vingulmark, and Haek fled to Alfheimr. 5. Halfdan's marriage with Jort's daughter. Sigurd Jort was the name of a king in Ringerike, who was stouter and stronger than any other man, and his equal could not be seen for a handsome appearance. His father was Helga Hvas the Sharp, and his mother was a Slog, a daughter of Sigurd the Worm, Ide, who again was a son of Ragnar Lodbrok. It is told of Sigurd that when he was only 12 years old, he killed in single combat the berserk Hildebrand, and 11 others of his comrades. And many are the deeds of manhood told of him in a long saga about his feats. Sigurd had 2 children, one of whom was a daughter, called Ragnhild, then 20 years of age, and an excellent brisk girl. Her brother Guthorm was a youth. It is related in regard to Sigurd's death that he had a custom of riding out quite alone in the uninhabited forest to hunt the wild beasts that are hurtful to man, and he was always very eager at this sport. One day he rode out into the forest as usual, and when he had ridden a long way, he came out at a piece of cleared land near to Hadeland. There the berserk Haek came against him with 30 men, and they fought. Sigurd Jort fell there, after killing 12 of Haek's men, and Haek himself lost one hand, and had 3 other wounds. Then Haek and his men rode to Sigurd's house, where they took his daughter Ragnhild and her brother Guthorm, and carried them, with much property and valuable articles, home to Hadeland, where Haek had many great farms. He ordered a feast to be prepared, intending to hold his wedding with Ragnhild, but the time passed on account of his wounds, which healed slowly, and the berserk Haek of Hadeland had to keep his bed, on account of his wounds, all the autumn and beginning of winter. Now King Halfdan was in Heidmark at the Yule entertainments when he heard this news. And one morning early, when the king was dressed, he called to him Herek Gand, and told him to go over to Heidland, and bring him Ragnhild, Sigurd Jort's daughter. Herek got ready with 100 men, and made his journey so that they came over the lake to Hake's house in the grey of the morning, and beset all the doors and stairs of the places where the house servants slept. Then they broke into the sleeping room where Hake slept, took Ragnhild, with her brother Guthorm, and all the goods that were there, and set fire to the house servants' place, and burnt all the people in it. Then they covered over a magnificent wagon, placed Ragnhild and Guthorm in it, and drove down upon the ice. Hake got up and went after them a while, but when he came to the ice on the lake, he turned his sword hilt to the ground and let himself fall upon the point, so that the sword went through him. He was buried under a mound on the banks of the lake. When King Halfdan, who was very quick of sight, saw the party returning over the frozen lake, and with a covered wagon, he knew that their errand was accomplished according to his desire. Thereupon he ordered the tables to be set out, and sent people all round in the neighborhood to invite plenty of guests. And the same day there was a good feast, which was also Halfdan's marriage feast with Ragnhild, who became a great queen. Ragnhild's mother was Thorny, a daughter of Klakarald king in Jutland, and a sister of Thry Danabod, who was married to the Danish king, Gorm the Old, who then ruled over the Danish dominions. 6. Of Ragnhild's dream. Ragnhild, who was wise and intelligent, dreamt great dreams. She dreamt, for one, that she was standing out in her herb garden, and she took a thorn out of her shift, but while she was holding the thorn in her hand it grew, so that it became a great tree, one end of which struck itself down into the earth, and it became firmly rooted, and the other end of the tree raised itself so high in the air that she could scarcely see over it, and it became also wonderfully thick. The under part of the tree was red with blood, but the stem upwards was beautifully green, and the branches white as snow. There were many and great limbs to the tree, some high up, others low down, and so vast were the tree's branches that they seemed to her to cover all Norway, and even much more. 7. Of Halfdan's dream. King Halfdan never had dreams, which appeared to him an extraordinary circumstance, and he told it to a man called Thorleif Spake the Wise, and asked him what his advice was about it. Thorleif said that what he himself did, when he wanted to have any revelation by dream, was to take his sleep in a swine sty, and then it never failed that he had dreams. The king did so, and the following dream was revealed to him. He thought he had the most beautiful hair, which was all in ringlets, some so long as to fall upon the ground, some reaching to the middle of his legs, some to his knees, some to his loins or the middle of his sides, some to his neck, and some were only as knots springing from his head. These ringlets were of various colors, but one ringlet surpassed all the others in beauty, luster, and size. This dream he told to Thorleif, who interpreted it thus: there should be a great posterity from him, and his descendants should rule over countries with great, but not all with equally great, honor. But one of his race should be more celebrated than all the others. It was the opinion of people that this ringlet betokened King Olaf the Saint. King Halfdan was a wise man, a man of truth and uprightness, who made laws, observed them himself, and obliged others to observe them, and that violence should not come in place of the laws. He himself fixed the number of criminal acts in law, and the compensations, mulcts, or penalties, for each case, according to everyone's birth and dignity. 1. Queen Ragnhild gave birth to a son, and water was poured over him, and the name of Harald given him, and he soon grew stout and remarkably handsome. As he grew up he became very expert at all feats, and showed also a good understanding. He was much beloved by his mother, but less so by his father. Endnotes. 1. The penalty, compensation, or manbod for every injury, due the party injured, or to his family and next of kin if the injury was the death or premeditated murder of the party, appears to have been fixed for every rank and condition, from the murder of the king down to the maiming or beating a man's cattle or his slave. A man for whom no compensation was due was a dishonored person, or an outlaw. It appears to have been optional with the injured party, or his kin if he had been killed, to take the mulct or compensation, or to refuse it, and wait for an opportunity of taking vengeance for the injury on the party who inflicted it, or on his kin. A part of each mulct or compensation was due to the king, and these fines or penalties appear to have constituted a great proportion of the king's revenues, and to have been settled in the things held in every district for administering the law with the lagman.
L.8.
Halfdan's meat vanishes.
At
A feast. King Halfdan was at a Yule feast in Headland, where a wonderful thing happened one Yule evening. When the great number of guests assembled were going to sit down to table, all the meat and all the ale disappeared from the table. The king sat alone, very confused in mind. All the others set off, each to his home, in consternation. That the king might come to some certainty about what had occasioned this event, he ordered a Finn to be seized who was particularly knowing, and tried to force him to disclose the truth. But however much he tortured the man, he got nothing out of him. The Finn sought help particularly from Harald, the king's son, and Harald begged for mercy for him, but in vain. Then Harald let him escape against the king's will, and accompanied the man himself. On their journey, they came to a place where the man's chief had a great feast, and it appears they were well received there. When they had been there until spring, the chief said, "Thy father took it much amiss that in winter I took some provisions from him. Now I will repay it to thee by a joyful piece of news. Thy father is dead, and now thou shalt return home, and take possession of the whole kingdom which he had, and with it thou shalt lay the whole kingdom of Norway under thee." 9. Halfdan's death. Halfdan the Black was driving from a feast in Headland, and it so happened that his road lay over the lake called Rand. It was in spring, and there was a great thaw. They drove across the bight, called Reykjanesvik, where in winter there had been a pond broken in the ice for cattle to drink at, and where the dung had fallen upon the ice the thaw had eaten it into holes. Now, as the king drove over it the ice broke, and King Halfdan and many with him perished. He was then 40 years old. He had been one of the most fortunate kings in respect of good seasons. The people thought so much of him, that when his death was known, and his body was floated to Ringerike to bury it there, the people of most consequence from Romerike, Vestfold, and Heidmark came to meet it. All desired to take the body with them to bury it in their own district, and they thought that those who got it would have good crops to expect. At last it was agreed to divide the body into 4 parts. The head was laid in a mound at Stein in Ringerike, and each of the others took his part home and laid it in a mound, and these have since been called Halfdan's mounds. Harald Harfager's Saga. 1. Harald's strife with Haek and his father Gandalf. Harald 1 was but 10 years old when he succeeded his father, Halfdan the Black. He became a stout, strong, and comely man, and withal prudent and manly. His mother's brother, Guthorm, was leader of the herd, at the head of the government,